The story begins in a noble's mansion, where a blind boy named Kunan is surrounded by his loved ones, all of whom have sympathetic looks on their faces. Everyone has always told him that his eyes weren't capable of seeing, so he often wonders what it really means to see. His father explains to him that seeing means having the ability to perceive colors and shapes. Apparently, Kunan became blind because his eyes bear the hero's scar, a mark left by the famous knight Hister Julia. Having such a scar isn't ordinary, his father tells him, so Kunan should feel somewhat proud of it and not ashamed. Despite that, even the maids whisper among themselves, thinking it's still sad, and they can't help but feel bad for him. Kunan overhears them and wonders why they would feel sorry for someone just because that person cannot see. Later that day, his magic teacher arrives, and a maid walks him over to the study room. On the way, Kunan asks the maid whether it's even necessary for him to learn magic at all. The maid tells him that it would be a waste of his talent if he doesn't. He was born with a water crest, and being able to use magic is a huge skill, a mark of pride he should take seriously. Kunan, however, doesn't see the point. Even if he learns to use magic, he still won't be able to go anywhere without someone guiding him along the way. When they arrive at the study room, he is introduced to his magic teacher, Jenny, who says it will be an honor to teach him magic. Shortly after, they begin their lessons, and Kunan appears to be a natural. He successfully performs his first spell on the very first try, creating a ball of water. Since Kunan cannot see, he has no idea what the spell looks like. Jenny explains that he is currently using water magic to make a water ball about the size of an eyeball. Hearing those words suddenly gives Kunan an idea. If he gets good enough at magic, he might even be able to create new eyeballs with his powers, which would allow him to see. From that day forward, Kunan gives himself the hope that through magic, he may one day be able to see shapes and colors just like everyone else. One day, during lunch, for the first time ever, Kunan becomes curious about what ingredients are in his sandwich. The maid comes over and explains each one to him in detail. Cooking for him suddenly feels much more rewarding now that he is genuinely interested in the food itself. After lunch, his tutor, Flora, meets him to read a book and asks him what story he wants to hear today. Kunan answers that he wants to hear the story of the famous knight Hister Julia. Flora hesitates when she hears this because she knows that Hister is the knight somewhat responsible for Kunan's blindness. The maid notices her hesitation and gives her a thumbs up, telling her that it will be fine. Flora agrees, but she asks Kunan to let her know if the story is too disturbing. Kunan promises her that he won't mind, explaining that he is eager to learn all kinds of information. As Flora narrates the story, Kunan learns that a long time ago, there was a war between the heroes of the world and the Demon Lord. Hister, the nation's hero, finally defeated the Demon Lord, but lost an arm and a leg in the process during a fierce battle. Since that war, every now and then, descendants of hero are born missing something, like a limb, their eyesight, or some other body part. People call these children the reincarnation of the hero or the hero's scar. Despite hearing all this, Kunan quietly thinks to himself that it's all nonsense. He knows that this is his life, and what truly matters is his own magical power. He does not need to be defined by someone else's story or by legends of heroism. What he can do with his magic is what shapes his future, not the myths surrounding the hero's scar. He has firmly made up his mind that through the use of magic, he is going to learn how to master it properly and eventually create eyeballs for himself using magic. However, all of this intense magic training ends up being far too strenuous on his young body, and as a result, he collapses from overwhelming fatigue. Aiko quickly rushes over and takes him back inside, so he can rest and clear his head. After he eventually comes back to his senses, Kunan makes up his mind once again that he needs to improve both his knowledge and his stamina, because passing out after prolonged use of magic is completely unacceptable for someone aiming to achieve such an ambitious goal. He realizes that in order to keep using magic for long periods, he needs to strengthen his physical body as well. Aiko suggests that he begin sword practice to build muscle and endurance, and also increase his food intake to support his growing body. However, she explains that all of this needs to be done in careful phases rather than all at once, or else he could harm himself. With that plan in mind, Kunan begins his training under one of the best retired swordsmen in the country, Master Yuoro. Although the training is difficult and exhausting, Kunan is clearly making steady progress little by little. Eventually, it becomes time for his magic lesson, so Jenny arrives at the training area, and Master Yuoro steps away to give them space. Jenny walks up to Kunan and tells him that she is impressed to see that he has started sword fighting practice as well. Kunan confirms this and explains that he is going to need a huge amount of stamina if he wants to achieve his goal. Jenny has always known Kunan as a gloomy and quiet child, but now she can clearly see that something has changed. He no longer feels empty or lost, and instead has a strong motivation pushing him forward. They then begin their magic class, course, and Jenny asks Kunan to repeat the spell they practiced during the last lesson. Previously, Kunan was only able to cast a single ball of water, but now he easily creates 6 or even 7 water balls at the same time. Jenny finds this completely unbelievable because she didn't teach him anything new, yet he managed to improve so dramatically on his own. Meanwhile, Princess Mirika, Kunan's fiancée, is scheduled to visit him that afternoon. She feels hesitant about the meeting because Kunan has always been far too gloomy for her liking. She understands that this political marriage is her duty as royalty, but she struggles to imagine spending the rest of her life with someone who feels so distant. However, when she arrives at the mansion, she immediately notices that something is different. Kunan has a new energy about him, and he even holds an engaging conversation with her. He shows her the water magic he has been practicing, and she finds it genuinely interesting. They end up spending the entire day together having a wonderful time. On the carriage ride back home, Mirika blushes as she thinks about him and finds herself eagerly waiting for the next time they meet. Kunan, on the other hand, realizes that he may have been taking Mirika for granted all this time. Because of that, he goes to meet Flora and asks her to teach him how to become a proper gentleman who will truly be worthy of Mirika. Later that night, Jenny reflects on Kunan's progress and can't ignore the fact that he was able to cast 7 water balls at the same time, something even she herself is incapable of doing. Kunan has clearly mastered elementary water magic, leaving her with very little left to teach him. Since she still needs to earn her pay, she decides to change her teaching approach. The next day during training, she suggests breaking water magic down into separate steps, such as producing the water, making it float, and maintaining the ball's shape. To demonstrate, she creates 2 water balls, one hot and one cold, and explains that controlling the state of magic is what separates beginner sorcerers from true professionals. Kunan decides to give the technique a proper try, so he pours some water into a cup using his magic. He then hands the cup to Aiko and asks her to taste it. After taking a sip, Aiko pauses for a moment before saying that the water strangely tastes like apples. Jenny tries her best not to show it on her face, but she is clearly irritated and frustrated that Kunan is once again mastering a skill almost immediately after she introduces it to him. That night, Kunan stays awake the entire time, constantly practicing and trying to fully master the technique Jenny taught him. He focuses deeply on visualizing apples in his mind, and while he is able to clearly recreate their shape and scent, he still cannot properly imagine their colors. This becomes a serious problem for him, because without being able to perceive color, he will never be able to create the eyeballs he desires. Even so, Kunan refuses to give up and vows to continue trying until he gets it right, no matter how long it takes. The next morning during breakfast, Kunan attempts his magic once again by forming a ball of water. As he carefully moves the floating water ball over the apples on the table, he suddenly stands up in shock. Aiko quickly asks him what happened, and Kunan excitedly explains that through his magic, he is now able to see colors. At first, Aiko doesn't believe him and thinks he might be imagining things, but Kunan proves it by confidently stating that there are 2 green apples and 3 red apples in the bowl. When she checks and realizes he is correct, she becomes overwhelmed with joy and gives him a tight hug to celebrate. Aiko immediately reports this incredible development to Kunan's father, explaining that Kunan can now use magic to see colors. She adds that the closer an object is and the clearer its shape, the more accurately he can identify its color simply by touching it. Aiko also mentions that this new ability allows Kunan to read books, since he can trace the ink on the pages and recognize the colors. Although he has not yet learned how to read letters properly, she is confident that he will eventually be able to do so. Kunan's father is thrilled upon hearing this news and feels deeply proud that his son is making such real and meaningful progress. The following day, Kunan attempts to surprise Jenny before she arrives by creating a massive red ball of water using his magic. However, just as he is concentrating, the rest of his family suddenly shows up, startling him badly. He loses his composure, causing the red water to burst and splash everywhere, completely covering both him and Aiko. Kunan ends up looking as though he is drenched in blood, which causes his mother to panic in terror and faint on the spot. Kunan has no idea why his mom just fainted, so Aiko explains that blood is red in color, so his mom just got a little spooked out. Kunan's father immediately scolds him for frightening his mother and punishes him by cutting off his allowance for 2 months. As for Aiko, he announces that her pay will be cut for 3 months. Since Aiko is entirely motivated by money, she faints the moment she hears this punishment. Meanwhile, Jenny watches the entire scene unfold from behind a nearby bush. As she observes everything, she realizes that Kunan is far more talented than she ever expected. With the speed of his growth, she comes to believe that he may one day earn the highest honor in the world, the title of Cerulean Sorcerer. A few days later, Kunan's father tells his older brother that he wants to send him to a school. Surprised, Ikshio points out that his brother has never seen the outside world. Gurion agrees, saying that he wants him to ensure his little brother can adjust well in the real world. Hearing this, Ikshio remembers a day from his own childhood when he was leading his brother outside to play. At the time, Kunan was feeling scared, so his brother offered to hold his hand the entire time. However, when he turned around to lead Kunan out, he tripped on the stairs and fell down. As the memory ends, Ikshio keeps his own fears hidden and reassures his dad that he'll do his best for his brother. The next day, Aiko watches curiously as Kunan fiddles with a dish of water. He explains that he enhanced the container with magic to use it as a fun fortune-telling device. Aiko immediately asks Kunan to use the container to find her long-lost will to live, so he tells her that she's still in her prime. She then wonders if Kunan can find her future husband, so he reassures her that a pretty woman like her will have no shortage of suitors. Watching the two of them exchange silly banter, Flora can't help but wonder whether teaching Kunan how to joke around was really a good idea. Afterward, she sits down with him for a lesson. Watching her master joke around, she wonders if he'll become a shallow playboy if he goes down the funny route. However, she feels glad that he has changed so much since he's smiling much more often. After the lesson, Aiko takes Kunan outside the house to meet his dad. Feeling cold, Aiko asks Kunan to make some hot water balls. After creating the water balls, Kunan feels worried that his dad wants to see him so late. Aiko thinks he'll be fine since he hasn't done anything wrong to upset him, except for that blood incident a while back. Kunan reminds her that she was the one who pushed him to do it anyway, but he didn't mind since he enjoyed the experience. Sometime later, they arrive at the main estate, where the head butler, Balin, greets them. Then, Kunan's brother comes over and starts leading him and Aiko towards his dad's chambers. As they walk together, Kunan's brother wonders if he needs his help to move around. Kunan shakes his head, reminding him that he can sense his surroundings pretty well now. His brother nods, still feeling uneasy from the last time he took care of his brother. Soon, they enter a room where both of Kunan's parents are waiting for them. After Kunan and his brother go in, Aiko and Balan remain outside the room. Then, Gurion asks Kunan if he's interested in going to a real school. Kunan refuses, saying that he doesn't want to trouble others to take care of him all the time. After explaining that he's focusing on something important to him at home, Kunan wonders if it's a problem if he doesn't go to school. His dad explains that although noble children are required to attend school, he got special permission from the emperor to keep Kunan at home because of his disability. Kunan feels outraged since he smells nepotism, but Gurion reminds him to focus on the matter at hand. He then asks Kunan to reconsider his decision to stay home. However, Kunan avoids the question and instead asks his dad to restore his allowance. This angers Gurion, so he leaps into a bickering match with Kunan. Luckily, his wife reminds him of his actual goal, so he calms down. He then explains to Kunan that he needs to go to school for Mirika's sake. He reminds Kunan that any noble who doesn't fulfill their duty is shunned by society, so Mirika would get harassed by everyone if she were to marry an illiterate boy. Hearing this, Kunan reconsiders his decision and agrees to go to school. Since he feels upset about going through so much trouble, Gurion reassures Kunan that he only needs to attend the advancement exams held every year. He explains that Kunan only needs to visit the school 5 times for his exams in order to receive his graduation certificate, which makes the boy feel relieved. Ikshio also reminds Kunan that he and Mirika are his seniors, so they can guide him through the school. Kunan's mother stands up, excited to get the right uniform for her son. As she calls Aiko and heads outside with her to get Kunan's measurements, Ikshio follows her. Gurion stops him, warning that other nobles might bother Kunan and Mirika at school. Ikshio understands this and promises to do his best to take care of his brother. The next day, Kunan tells Mirika that he's going to school. She smiles, happy to spend more time with her fiancé. Kunan admits that he's a bit scared of the new environment, so she promises to take good care of him. Kunan thanks her for the help, but thinks that they'll get into trouble with her jealous admirers. Mirika hesitates and acts like it won't be a problem, so Kunan wonders if she isn't popular at school. She quickly shakes her head, proudly admitting that 5 boys have expressed their interest in her. Kunan sighs, realizing that he needs to prepare himself to deal with some jealous teenagers. Later, he dresses up in his uniform to go to school. As Kunan heads out of the house to ride his carriage, Aiko starts fawning over him for his dashing looks. Kunan jokes with her about his good looks before getting inside the carriage. Before they leave, he uses his water spell to coat the carriage's tires in a cushioning gel. Finally, Kunan says goodbye to his family and heads out for the city. As they ride on the carriage, Ikshio notes that the tires are running completely smooth on the rough terrain. Kunan explains that he designed the spell for a smooth ride since they could get back pain from all the bumps in the road. Feeling proud of his abilities, he wonders if he can get a job in the future as a magic serviceman. Ikshio Ixio then asks if he's feeling nervous about school. Kunon shakes his head, saying that he has grown much stronger now. He thanks Ixio for all the times he helped him and apologizes for burdening him with his condition. Kunon also tells Ixio to stop worrying about the time he got injured under his watch. While Ixio is surprised, Kunon tells him that he's now determined to keep moving no matter the hurdles that block his path. Ixio smiles, happy that his brother has changed from his depressed past self. Suddenly, Kunon starts going further and further, saying that he'll even outlive the rest of the world just to properly enjoy his life. In the end, Ixio wonders if the maid is behind the sudden change in his brother's personality. As they get closer to school, Ixio gets surprised since Kunon can detect all the people nearby. Soon, they arrive outside the school's building, where Kunon steps out of the carriage. Mirika rushes over to greet her fiancé, who starts rambling on about how pretty she is. Mirika smiles and returns his banter, leaving Ixio completely baffled. Mirika then turns around to lead Kunon inside, but he remains standing in his spot. While Mirika feels confused, Kunon pays attention to all the voices he's hearing from inside the building. Although he feels some pressure in facing so many people, this time, he feels confident that he can handle it. Once he's mentally prepared, Kunon reaches his hand out to Mirika. He asks her to escort him like a delicate girl, so she smiles and agrees. Meanwhile, in another part of the school, Kunon's special teacher, Cast, wonders why her new student hasn't arrived yet. Knowing that Kunon is the son of a marquess, she starts to question whether a teacher as inexperienced as herself is truly capable of instructing him. Cast then hears some girls around her gushing over a handsome new student. While she watches in shock, Kunon walks away with his fiancée. Cast quickly regains her bearings and catches up and introduces herself as his new teacher. Kunon returns her greeting like a girl, explaining that he's playing the part of a delicate lady. This completely stuns Cast, but the school bell rings and breaks her out of the awkward situation. Then, Mirika and Ixio leave Kunon with his teacher and head off to their classes. After the two of them walk away, Cast thinks that she'll have her hands full with this weirdo student. Nearby, some students watch Kunon from a window. One of them points out that Kunon is blessed with a hero's scar, so the prince gets angered. Seeing his anger, the rest of Prince Lyle's lackeys quickly cover up their praises with fake insults. Then, the prince turns around and tells his group to follow him. Meanwhile, Cast gets ready to take Kunon's advancement exam in a private room. She asks Kunon if he knows the gist of it, so he nods. Cast explains that although exams are usually taken with long gaps in between, Kunon will get to attempt his exams in a shorter period. Kunon feels confused, so she reveals that his dad negotiated with the king to get a special exception for his son. Kunon then points out that his dad is actually close friends with the king. However, he can't help but feel guilty that his father had to rely on nepotism on his behalf. Kunon apologizes to Cast for pressuring the school for his sake, but she pretends to ignore it. However, he keeps going and starts complaining about the rampant corruption within noble society. Cast quietly hands Kunon the exam paper, trying to shift his focus to somewhere else. Kunon ignores it and keeps insulting his corrupt father, so Cast finally begs him to stop involving her with the politics of high society. A little while later, she takes Kunon's exam papers and sits alone to grade them. Since Kunon kept yapping about noble families, Cast expects his test answers to be horrible. However, as she actually checks his answers, she gets shocked to see that he got them all correct. Elsewhere, Kunon heads to the cafeteria to have lunch with Mirika. Suddenly, Prince Lyle and his group stop them. Lyle calls out to his sister, prompting her to nervously fuss with her clothes. Kunon wonders who stopped her and steps forward to confront Lyle. Behind them, Ixio walks over, shocked to see a noble family member harassing his brother. Meanwhile, Lyle insults Kunon for getting engaged to his sister despite his disability. Although Mirika feels upset, she feels powerless to speak up against her elder brother. Kunon senses her discomfort, so he gets ready to punish Lyle. Before he can move, Ixio steps in to mediate the situation. Unfortunately, Lyle gets angry and orders him to get out of the way. While Ixio feels trapped, Kunon quietly uses his water spell to gather water from his surroundings. He then directs all of it toward Lyle's pants, making it look like he peed himself. Kunon then innocently points out that the prince has a wet spot on his pants, which shocks everyone. Lyle gets embarrassed and claims that he didn't do it, but he quickly leaves the area to clean himself up. After he leaves, Ixio immediately realizes that Kunon played a prank on the prince. He asks his brother if he's the one who messed with Lyle, but Kunon acts like he doesn't know anything. Ixio then sits down with Kunon and Mirika to have lunch. After they all get their food, Kunon asks Mirika who Lyle was. She explains that he's her older brother, so Kunon feels sad that he's too mean to her. Kunon thanks Ixio for always being a kind sibling to him. Meanwhile, Ixio feels terrified since Kunon just humiliated a royal prince in public. Mirika tells him to stop worrying about it, but Ixio knows knows he'll get into trouble soon. Elsewhere, Lyle angrily stomps away, furious about the embarrassment he just went through. Meanwhile, Kunan is having lunch together with his group. While they talk about what happened earlier, they all wonder why Lyle openly stood in front of them and didn't even try to hide his violent attitude. Mirika is the first to give her thoughts, presuming that Lyle most likely acted that way to keep her in check. She explains that Lyle is the 6th prince, while she herself is the 9th princess, which naturally places her below him in the royal hierarchy. However, Mirika continues by pointing out that since she is now engaged to Kunan, the situation has changed. Kunan bears the hero's scar and is also a highly capable sorcerer, so because of that, her standing in society has risen dramatically. On top of that, now that Kunan has officially made his debut into high society, both his status and Mirika's would naturally be considered higher than Lyle's. Hearing all of this, Kunan admits that it sounds way too complicated for him to fully understand. So Mirika simplifies it and says that all that really matters is that she's happy to be engaged to him. Kunan smiles and says that he's glad to hear that as well. Still, he mentions that it might be a good idea for him to go and apologize to Lyle, just to avoid future trouble. The moment he says that, both Ixio and Mirika immediately shut the idea down and tell him not to even think about doing something like that. Before long, time passes quickly and the day of Kunan's final exam arrives. Before heading out, he squeezes in one last short training session with Jenny. During the session, Kunan creates a ball of water and then smoothly transforms it into a solid ball of ice, shaped and sized like an apple. Seeing this, Jenny is genuinely impressed and comments on how far Kunan has come in such a short period of time. Later that afternoon, Kunan arrives at the academy and prepares himself for the final exam. He looks around at his surroundings and feels a bit excited, as the place truly looks and feels like a real school now. Professor Cast approaches him and wishes him good luck, though she adds that Kunan probably won't need it given how skilled he's become. Shortly after that, several other students gather around and ask Mirika to introduce her fiancé to them. With that cue, Kunan formally introduces himself as Mirika's fiancé and Ixio's little brother. He puts on a polite and charming demeanor, greeting them and saying that it's lovely to meet everyone. After seeing his behavior and hearing the way he speaks, the other students immediately form the impression that Kunan is a perfect gentleman. At the same time, Lyle is standing off to the side, staring out the window while quietly scheming and cooking up his next plan. His thoughts are interrupted when some of the other students call out to him and tell him to come to the classroom because the final exam is about to begin. Lyle arrogantly responds that he'll come whenever he feels like it. The others quickly remind him that the final exam will be conducted all at once, and if he doesn't show up now, he'll miss it. Lyle takes a look at the expressions on his classmates' faces and gets pissed off because he just realizes that these cowards can't say anything to his face and would rather talk behind his back instead. That realization only fuels his irritation even more, but just then, Kunan suddenly lights up with an excited expression, steps forward, and grabs Lyle's hands, formally introducing himself since he didn't really get the chance to do so properly the other day. Kunan grips Lyle's hand firmly and starts shaking it repeatedly with enthusiasm. Lyle immediately snaps back, reminding Kunan that he never gave him permission to speak to him, let alone touch his hand like that. Kunan quickly apologizes for being rude, but instead of backing off, he immediately starts showering Lyle with even more compliments. The non-stop praise slowly causes Lyle to blush despite himself. Everyone around them notices how flustered Lyle looks, and before long, the students start laughing, amused by the sight since they never imagined Lyle could react like that. Not long after that, everyone takes their seats and the final exam begins. It doesn't take much time before the exams are graded, and Professor Cass stands before the entire class to announce the results. She turns toward the board and draws a flower on it, signaling that the students have passed. The classroom erupts into cheers as the students congratulate one another on successfully passing their final exam. With the final exam completed, Kunan departs in his carriage while waving and bidding everyone farewell, saying that he hopes they'll cross paths again someday. When Kunan arrives back at the mansion, he immediately resumes his training with Jenny. She asks him to create a ball of water and then split it into 10 separate pieces. Kunan does exactly as instructed, but then he tells Jenny that he's been working on a small trick of his own. To demonstrate, he transforms one of the water balls into a bird, which flaps its wings and flies away. Jenny is left completely speechless by what she just witnessed. After a moment, she drops to her knees, realizing that there's almost nothing left that she can teach him anymore. Shortly afterward, the two of them sit down to enjoy some tea together. It's then that Jenny finally decides to be honest and tells Kunan the truth that she truly has nothing more to teach him. She explains that he has already mastered elementary magic, and once he starts learning more advanced spells, he will surpass her in no time. Jenny admits that this has been the case for a while now, which is why she kept coming up with different and seemingly random training exercises out of sheer desperation. Upon hearing this, Kunan immediately stands up in objection. He tells her that he was already aware of it, but those very exercises were what helped him broaden his magical range. He firmly states that if it weren't for those exercises, he never would have come this far. Kunan asks Jenny if she's trying to quit because the pay is too low, and says that if that's really the case, he can simply tell his father to give her a raise. However, Jenny shakes her head and explains that it's actually the complete opposite. She says she finds it unbearable to keep receiving such generous pay when she no longer has a proper role to fulfill as his teacher. Jenny then walks over to Kunan and places her hands on his shoulders, looking straight at him as she tells him that she has truly reached her limit and doesn't have anything more she can teach him. Kunan immediately refuses to accept that. He tells her that he wants her to keep coming up with those small exercises, even if they're nothing more than tricks meant to deceive him. He says he doesn't mind being deceived at all if it means he can continue getting stronger. But Jenny simply looks Kunan directly in the eyes and firmly tells him that she can't do it anymore. After saying that, she turns around and takes her leave. As she walks back home, she reflects on all the incredible things Kunan has accomplished so far and starts to believe that he might truly have what it takes to become the cerulean sorcerer. That thought suddenly sparks a burst of motivation within her. She tells herself that if Kunan can do it, then so can she. She refuses to lose to her own student and realizes that it's still not too late for her to push herself further. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Aiko informs Kunan that Flora has also quit her position. Since Kunan has finished his curriculum and officially graduated from the school for noble children, her duties are complete as well. Kunan feels a bit saddened that he never got the chance to properly say goodbye to her, but the maid explains that Flora didn't say her farewells because she knew she would end up bursting into tears. Hearing that, Kunan decides that he'll send her a letter to properly thank her for everything she's done. Later that evening during dinner, Kunan tells his father, Arsen, about what happened with Jenny and how she resigned from being his magic teacher. He explains that Jenny believed Kunan deserved an exceptionally talented magician as his instructor. As they think about this for a while, Ikshou suddenly recalls rumors about an extraordinary royal sorcerer who goes by the name Xianli. Kunan immediately says that he wants Xianli to be his new magic teacher. However, Arsen suddenly speaks up and shuts the idea down, telling them that it won't be happening because it's simply impossible to invite a royal sorcerer to teach here. Apparently, royal sorcerers are extremely high profile in this kingdom and answer only to the king or members of the royal family. On top of that, they rarely leave the castle, which makes getting into contact with them extremely difficult. Hearing this, Kunan comes up with an idea. He plans to accompany his father when he visits the castle, intentionally get lost during the visit, and when one of the royal sorcerers comes to help him, he'll somehow convince them to take him on as an apprentice. However, Arsen immediately shoots down the plan the moment he hears it. He tells Kunan that it's a really dumb idea with a success rate under 10% and says there's no way they'll go through with it, so Kunan should just forget about it. But after Kunan's mother gives Arsen the puppy dog eyes, he immediately changes his mind and says he'll talk to the king about it to see what he can do. A couple of days later, a grandmaster receives Kunan's formal request to be trained by a royal sorcerer. At first, the grandmaster doesn't seem impressed by the request at all and is just about to toss it aside. But then, upon seeing that the request came from Kunan Gurion, the bearer of the hero scar, the grandmaster pauses, clearly intrigued. That was episode 3. Subscribe to not miss the next part and watch the next video on screen.